and thanks everybody for taking time out of your day to join us. This morning we're going to talk about Siemens Polarion and Confluence. And just to give a little introduction, if you can see it's kind of dark here, that's because we've started into the fall-winter season here in Detroit, where I'm located. But Sodis Willard's a global company with offices in France and Germany as well. And we work with many of your teams in the engineering space, aerospace, automotive, defense. And our goal is to be able to make sure that we can get our engineering tools connected together. Now, we're going to be pretty simple here. I have a few slides to go through to set the context, but then we're going to do more demo heavy discussion. I'm an engineer, so I know seeing how tools work and seeing how they interact are probably the most important thing that you'll get out of this interaction. So to give you a little bit of a feel of what we're talking about here and why we want to be able to make sure that we connect Polarion and Confluence together, is because these tools are very good at us being able to connect engineering data in Polarion. It's where we can do requirements, test management, change management, reporting. It's really in the language of engineers. And then when we get into Confluence, it's very good for us to be able to do shareable workspaces and be able to do simple content creation, being able to have templates on how we create meeting minutes, things like that. It's a very good informal tool for us to be able to share information. Now, the challenges when we get into these tools is the differences in terms of Confluence is really good at doing informal data, but when we start doing formal content, doing things that are more secure, more version management, it tends to be less interesting or less valuable. As opposed to when we work in Polarion, we have a lot more rigor in how we create content. That can get in the way when we're trying to just do simple and informal things. And so what we're trying to do here is really make it easier for people to collaborate for engineering. And so what we're trying to do is create that bridge. And so when we look at these tools that we utilize, and what we're trying to do is make sure that Confluence is really good and critical to the engineering enterprise, but we want to keep engineering data and engineering tools. And we want to be able to make it easy to bridge across there. We don't want to have copies. In general, we just want to be able to make teams more productive. What we're utilizing here is actually an industry standard called OSLC. We don't always use that with Polarion, but Polarion has a wonderful capabilities around OSLC to connect between tools. We use it with our Jira connector as well. But the nice thing about OSLC is it allows us to be able to preserve repositories, meaning that we can keep data where it was created, where it resides, and we can create and manage those unique data models that are in those tools. So the usage that you'll see with Confluence here means that that data stays in Polarion, and we're just referencing and viewing it from Confluence. And it allows us to be able to link across different projects. So you'll see the structure in place where I can shape how somebody in Confluence might connect to Polarion and be able to interact with that. Now, it's also very good at being able to work in the enterprise, because what we're going to have here is authentication and audit controls, meaning that to access that content in Polarion, I need to actually have permissions to see those artifacts. And that's actually a brilliant way to be able to have these two tools work together, because oftentimes we had engineers copying diagrams or copying data out of Polarion into Confluence to be able to share that information. Then we're breaking that chain of trust relative to who can see what data. Now, when we utilize it in this way, we have more capabilities, we have more controls over who has access to data, and we can keep this distributed and connected topology. So it maps really well to what our IT owners are trying to be able to create. Now, so what product are we actually providing? Because obviously we're not building Confluence, we're not building the Polarion implementation. What we are doing is we are creating that connection between that. So we have a marketplace approved application for Confluence. We have the ability to be able to have these server collaborations and some of the UI elements that you'll see in here. And it really is what's providing us the capability to be able to interact with these engineering artifacts without copies. So we're creating that connection, that workflow, that secure interface between Confluence and your Polarion enterprise. Now, what are you going to see here as we go through this demo? You're going to see how we can use Confluence, how we can connect it to Polarion requirements, specifications, tests, change requests. pretty much any of these artifacts that we have contained within Polarion and how we can represent those within Confluence. And the nice thing is we'll be able to see how you can link to those artifacts, how you can see data within Confluence, and really be able to navigate back into Polarion where you need to. So using Confluence as that entry point to how people want to collaborate with their systems. And so as we go through this demo, we're going to try to do some pragmatic things about how to be able to use the tool and how to be able to interact with it. It should be relatively simple and straightforward. Most people that have been using Confluence or using Polarion should be able to follow right along. And then we'll give little hints on how you can be able to start a free trial afterwards and be able to have us help you be successful with it. So with that, let me switch over to a live demo. That way you can see what's there and see how it works, and I can give you a bit of tour of what OSLC with Confluence and Polarion looks like. So let's go over to Confluence. Let me just give a quick introduction for those who might be Polarion users that haven't used Confluence. Confluence is basically a simple markup web environment. It's a way for engineers to be able to write things about projects, be able to share information about projects, be able to write some simple text, and be able to put hyperlinks into these elements. And so a couple things to be able to pay attention to. Number one is on these links, you'll see that when we're connecting to a repository, it's actually going to force us to be able to log in. I've already logged into my Polarion server. I haven't logged into Jira, which is this other link that I have here. So you'll see this type of flow if I hadn't logged into Polarion, where it's going to actually demand me to log into that repository to be able to see that interface and see that the contents that go there. And the value there is it means that anytime that I'm accessing information from a remote server, I'm going to be authenticated to it, and that's the only way that I can see the information from that remote repository. The other thing that commonly comes up here is how is this different than me just putting a URL in here? So I do have an example here. This is just a URL. If you were using Confluence and dropping in a URL, what you'd get is just a link to that artifact. If you wanted to see more about that, you'd have to navigate to it, be able to click on it to be able to go navigate that artifact and see more details. It's not a live dynamic link. It's a link that just simply says, there's an artifact over here. It would force you to be able to browse over to that artifact to be able to see the content and see that interface. And so that's the difference is I'd have to be able to navigate over to that. Now, instead, what we're trying to do is trying to create a dynamic interface, meaning that as I interact with the system, is I can actually see live up-to-date data within Confluence. So not only do I have a link, so this is exactly the same artifact here, but I also have the ability to be able to see what's called a rich hover. And that means that I'm going to dynamically go ahead and get information from that remote repository and be able to present that. And what you can see here is some of the power of OSLC. So even though I'm in Confluence, I'm seeing Polarion data. And that formatting of that Polarion data, you can actually see is actually being delivered by Polarion itself. So as you have that data, as you customize it within Polarion, you can be able to have that information within these other tools as long as you follow this OSLC standard. Now, we can do a preview like this, which is just a simple preview. We can actually do a larger preview, and you can see that Polarion provides us with even more information. Now, the great thing here is I'm authenticated, I have access to this, I have not left Confluence. So think of this as a great way to be able to present engineering data to both your engineering teams, but also some of your management team. If they have information they want to be able to access and be able to see easy, and you want to be able to capture that information, you can do that rather quickly. Other examples of these types of things are things like requirements documents. So I might have some key document references that I want somebody to be able to read. Now, the wonderful thing when we're working with Polarion is that I also, not only do I have a link to that specification, I can actually browse through and read this specification. So without even having to go to Polarion, I can see this content, see this capability. And so as I'm navigating, and so you can think of this as a way to be able to help shape how somebody might look at a project. So you can use this for project reviews. You might have only certain documents or certain requirements you want somebody to look at, or it can be things for meeting minutes as well. So it gives you an idea in terms of what types of interactions we can do. and what types of different controls we can do as well. So as we go through here, what I want to be able to show you is not only can we do this view and be able to see this content, it also takes place in how we interact with these tools. So if I'm going to edit, and this is the nice thing about Confluence, it's very easy to be able to add new content. So I can go ahead and simply add some new content here, add new references. And if I can actually spell right, that actually even works even better. But I can go ahead and use macros within here. I have a nice OSLC link macro in here. And what this is going to do, it's going to give me a dialog. It allows me to be able to pick what artifacts I might want to connect to. And the nice thing about this, it allows me to organize it based on what type of artifact I might want to connect to. So in this case, maybe I want to create a link to a requirement. I can be able to pick my project that I want to have that link to. And then I'm going to get a dialog that allows me to be able to select the requirement that I might want to be able to pick from. And it's going to go make this request over to Polarion, and Polarion is going to provide me a list of requirements that I might want to be able to interact with and be able to select. And so once it presents me this list of artifacts in here, I can go ahead and pick one of these and be able to make a dynamic link. And it simply is just selecting the artifact. I now have a link to it. Now, the other nice thing about here is that I can actually preview. Just by double clicking on this, I can be able to see a preview of what that looks like. I can be able to see what a rich hover would look like to that, so I have access to that. But we also have the other options to be able to not only display it as a link, but we can embed a small or even a large preview of that artifact. Now, oftentimes if I'm just doing a requirement, I'm going to keep this as a link. And so I can go ahead and save that and just keep that link reference and be able to interact with it that way. Or if I want to, with things like requirements documents, oftentimes I actually do want to have this be a large preview because it's a document. I want to encourage people to go ahead and go read this. And so if I do this, it's just as simple as being able to do an update, publish this document in Confluence. Then the next time somebody comes and looks at this page, they're going to see the new contents that I added. So I added this new reference. So we'll see that content, but we're also seeing that large preview that's already embedded for that specification. So I don't have to do a rich hover. It's available. It's easy for people to be able to interact and be able to see that content, just that simple. Now, not only can I just create links to artifacts, the other nice thing about this interaction is that I also can create content. Oftentimes I might be doing things like taking meeting minutes. I might have some action items. So I can do things like go ahead and trigger creating a link. But I might want to actually, instead of creating a requirement, I might want to be able to create a action item. So I might be able to say, I want to create a new action item in my Drive pilot project. And you're going to see that now, instead of having a selection dialog, I'm going to get a creation dialog from Polarion that allows me to be able to create a new artifact within that remote system. And the nice thing about this means that without actually, if I'm dynamically updating my content in Confluence and having a meeting, I don't have to navigate to that other tool. And what's nice about this is I can go ahead and create new task. You're going to see that I have mandatory fields that I might have to be able to populate, and this is just my native editor from within Polarion. So I have access to all the fields that I expect, have ability to be able to link to other artifacts and be able to create those elements. And when I create this element, not only am I creating in Polarion, I'm also creating a reference to it in things like my meeting minutes. So now, not only do I have I created that action item within my meeting, now what's going to take place is that within my meeting minutes, if we consider these being my meeting minutes, you're going to have a dynamically updated artifact within my Confluence page, which means that as people make changes to this artifact, as they make changes to the title, the details of that, they're going to have immediate access to it. So the next day when somebody goes and looks through the meeting minutes, they're going to see the status of these artifacts. They're going to see when they've been updated. They're going to see the contents to it. If they need to go navigate over to them to make a change, make a comment, they can do that just as quick as being able to hit that navigation link and go over and modify those artifacts. So it provides a great way to be able to interact between those elements and be able to allow us to be able to control the interactions and how somebody might interact with our Confluence and Polarion systems. Now, a couple things to keep in mind. We do have a fair amount of control on how these interactions take place, meaning that as I interact with my system here within Confluence, what I get to do is I get to control the relationships that I allow, meaning that if I go into my Confluence system and my configuration, I get to identify which projects my Confluence space is connected to. The reason why this is valuable, this allows me to be able to control how somebody might create links and might allow them to be able to define on how they might make those connection points that they find valuable. And this allows us to be able to say, okay, if I want to be able to make a relationship to which projects and what type of artifacts would I want to be able to create. So it's as simple as saying I want to add an association. I can pick one of my repositories that I might want to make a connection to. So let's go ahead and I can pick one of my other Polarion systems if I want. I get to pick what domain that I might want to connect to. So these are standard domains within the OSLC specification, pretty common: requirements management, quality management or test management, and change management. And then I get to be able to, in addition to that, also be able to identify which project I want to connect to. And so let's go ahead and log into the system. And I apologize, my system seems to be a little bit slow as I'm doing a web broadcast here. So obviously it's a little bit lagging as we're interacting here, but it allows me to be able to say a few words as we navigate from one thing to another. But once I log into this system, I'm allowing to be able to select which projects I might want to be able to make that association with. And so you can see through here, I can be able to pick, say, maybe one of my projects and add another association there. That's what allows me to be able to pick which artifacts I might be able to create in which domain, as well as which projects I'm connected to. So this way you can shape for your particular project. You're not going to select from any Polarion project, but you're picking from only select projects to be able to create those relationships. And so it gives us a lot of power to be able to interact with the system. And so let's go back to our pages because there's another element that I want to show here as well, which kind of gets in the configuration side. Is Polarion has a lot of power on how we might interact with the system. And so I'll give you a little bit of a flavor here on this. We go into edit here. We get to decide in Polarion how we want to map the Polarion artifacts into OSLC and which elements we have access to. And you'll see this a little bit, and we'll kind of dive a little bit behind the scenes here. When I go to create a link, and let's do a link to let's do quality management. And if I go to create an artifact, you're going to see that I have the option to be able to create a software test case and a system test case. These aren't part of the OSLC standard, but they are what we've defined within Polarion that we want to map to a test case, which is part of the OSLC standard. And so even when I want to go to create, I'm going to be able to pick from one of these two. If I wanted to select an artifact, it's going to automatically filter and based on those selection criteria for me, so that it's only going to pick test cases. So when we see which artifacts that we can select from, they're only going to be those system and software test cases that we can actually select from that are in this dialog. This is what Polarion's actually doing in the background. Now, behind the scenes within Polarion, we do have the ability to be able to map relationships. And you can see this is actually a configuration that I have. If you get really close to your screen right now, you'll be able to see how we mapped some of our OSLC change requests to the different types of Polarion artifacts that we have. In this case, I also have you see the mapping to software test case and system test case here. I have commented out unit test case just because I knew that I probably make a mistake when typing something in during a webinar. We can uncomment this and be able to save this mapping. Now, what this is telling Polarion is that from an OSLC type, in addition to software test case and system test case, our unit test case type in Polarion, we also want to be able to make available to this interface, meaning that when I come back to Confluence here, we'll see how far we need to reset this. But I think if I just come back here to my link initiation, come back to quality management, when I come to create an artifact, let's be able to see if we actually went back and we asked Polarion, what types do I have available? Now you'll see I have my unit test case available as a type that I can create. And then it's going to give me my unit test case dialog to be able to create an artifact. So it gives me a lot of power to be able to both adapt what my own process is within Polarion into what I can see within Confluence, and be able to create or restrict what visibility that I want to be able to allow links to. And so you have a lot of power using that OSLC interface. We use it for our Jira connector, but we also use it here for Confluence to be able to shape what contents are available from Polarion. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of how we might be able to interact with systems and operate with those. And then one other thing, so now we have access to that. The other thing that we did that we knew was going to be important for a lot of our users was the concept of drag and drop. There's often situations where we have new artifacts, or we have artifacts we want to create a relationship to. We already have them open in one web browser. We just want to be able to go ahead and drag these over here if we want to be able to create a link. And the idea here is that we understand what that artifact type is, and we can go ahead and simply just drag and drop those artifacts over here. It allows it to be much simpler for us to be able to create linkages and be able to drop contents and be able to create lots of links at the same time. So you do have a lot of flexibility to be able how you create those links. And then once you've actually created those, you can change how you might display those as well. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of preview. The idea here is that we're going to create this binding that allows you to be able to make your engineering data more visible in Confluence and be able to take more advantage of all that content that you put within Polarion. So with that, I'm going to take a pause here and hand it back over to Alexia, because oftentimes there's questions that have come in, and hopefully we can answer any questions that might be coming this way. And if you have other questions, don't be shy. Go ahead and ask those in either the chat or the question dialogue, and we'll try to get to them here or follow up after the webinar. I do also want to let you know this is available in the Atlassian Marketplace. Feel free to go search for the Sodius Willard OSLC Connect for Confluence and be able to deploy it in your system. And then we'll be available to be able to help you be able to connect it to your Polarion environment, and reach out for us for any questions and support. Those trials are always free, and we always encourage people to try our tools before they buy our tools. We have that much confidence that we can help your team. So thank you very much for all the time and questions. It's very helpful, and look forward to being able to work with your teams in the future.